Hello and good afternoon. My name is Casey Klupfer. I'm a second-year student here at the LBJ School and co-chair of the 17th Annual Barbara Jordan Forum. The Barbara Jordan Forum is a week-long series of events organized by students to honor the legacy of a great teacher and public servant. As many of you know, Barbara Jordan was not only a distinguished, groundbreaking policymaker and Congresswoman, but also a dedicated and beloved LBJ school professor for 17 years until her death in 1996. This forum is intended to facilitate dialogue on the many policy issues that Congresswoman Jordan championed in her lifetime. Although the opening keynote luncheon is our focus of today, I wanted to let you know about the rest of this week's events that honor the legacy of Barbara Jordan. Throughout this week, several student groups have scheduled forums, panels, and guest speakers during the noon hour that will focus on the policy issues. In addition, on Friday, we're honoring her legacy by having a service event between noon and 3. The full schedule is available on the school's website, and you can sign up for the service event as well. All of these events, including today's luncheon, were planned around a theme chosen by the LBJ school students. This year's theme is See the Change, pressing towards equality of outcomes. Barbara Jordan is a symbol of the promise of civil rights, not just of equality of opportunities, but equality of outcomes. However, today, 49 years after the Civil Rights Act, this promise remains unfulfilled for many in this nation. This year's theme was inspired by excerpts from Barbara Jordan's iconic address to the 1976 Democratic National Convention. I will not ruin it by reading it to you. Instead, let's listen to the voice of God.
The Honorable Barbara Jordan, Democrat of Houston, Texas.
We are a people in search of a national community. We are attempting to fulfill our national purpose, to create and sustain a society in which all of us are equal. We cannot improve on the system of government handed down to us by the founders of the Republic, but what we can do is to find new ways to implement that system and realize our destiny.
Thank you very much. And let me now introduce Robert Hutchings, Dean of the LBJ School of Public Affairs.
Thanks very much, Casey. And no, I didn't use the rotator cuff surgery as an excuse not to wear a tie. I actually tried to put one on this morning, Shirley, but it was just too painful. So let me just, thanks again, Casey. And it's emblematic of how much students are involved in the planning of this week celebrating Barbara Jordan's legacy. And it's a reminder of how omnipresent she is in this school. Every day we think about her legacy, her impact, and the promise not entirely fulfilled that she represented. So thanks to you and to your fellow student co-chairs of this wonderful series of events. Let me also acknowledge some special guests, mindful that I'm not going to be able to name all of our actually you're all special guests, but let me mention a few, including my good friend, our former dean and professor emeritus, Max Sherman. Where are you, Max? Gregory Vincent, UT's Vice President for Diversity and Community Engagement. Dr. King Davis, Director of the Institute for Urban Policy Research here at UT and a Professor of African and African Diaspora Studies. Chris Plonsky, UT's Women's Athletic Director. And Susan Reef, an LBJ School alumna, who is, of course, Director of the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. I'd also like to extend a special word of appreciation to a number of our prominent alumni, many of whom were students of Professor Jordan, who are here today, and took time out of their schedules to serve as table hosts for today's luncheon, sharing their experiences and insights with current students, much as Barbara Jordan did for 17 years here at the LBJ School. You honor her by our presence by your presence, and we thank you very much for being here. We are so very pleased that the Honorable Shirley Franklin, former mayor of Atlanta, will deliver this year's keynote address. As the school's newly appointed Barbara Jordan Visiting Professor in Ethics and Political Values, Shirley embodies the spirit, passion, and dedication of Barbara Jordan. As one of the nation's most respected former mayors, it is fitting that Shirley be the keystone for our celebration of the life and legacy of Barbara Jordan, one of our country's most distinguished public servants and a cherished member of our LBJ community. On a personal note, let me just say that I've come to know Shirley from our many, many conversations over the past year, and I've come to know, admire, and just plain like her over this past year. I know that you will feel the same way after you get to know her as I have begun to get to know her. To give you some greater context for this forum and what Barbara Jordan's legacy truly means to this school and community, I would like to show a brief video produced by the Longhorn Network around last year's forum. Special thanks to Kathleen Mabley, UT's Director of Brand Initiatives, for her efforts to increase public awareness of the significance of Barbara Jordan's role as an educator here at UT. After the video, please enjoy your lunch, which will be followed by the formal introduction of our keynote speaker by LBJ 2007 alum Ladi Mosadami, a member of the National Forum for Black Administrators. Thanks very much.
The first thing you have to do is to decide to do it, to do what you want to do, and then overcome all of those so-called handicaps which people are supposed to have and make it an obsession with you, the obsession of achievement, if I can call it that.
What made Barbara special was her sense of dignity of each human being. And I think it came out of the fact that she had overcome so many barriers. She overcame the racial barrier, she overcame the gender barrier, she overcame the physical handicap barrier, and yet that didn't affect the way she looked at people. And I think that's the way she looked at society.
Barbara Jordan was also a pioneer. In 1966, she became the first African-American elected to the Texas Senate in almost a century. 6 years later, she left Texas for Washington, D.C. as the first Southern African-American Congresswoman in U.S. history. In 1979, she returned to Texas, working as a professor at the LBJ School of Public Affairs, the same school that sponsored the 16th annual Barbara Jordan Forum last February.
She was Black, she was a woman, she also had a female partner. She stood up for people when it was necessary, and I think it's always important to honor people who do what they believe is right, because I don't know if a lot of people do that anymore.
Barbara Jordan was a great teacher. She was a great mentor. It's her seed that she is passing down, and that's a phenomenal part to be a part of.
If you go to her gravesite out at the State Cemetery, on the back side of that monument, there's only one word, and that word is teacher. What she wanted to be remembered as, with all the things she did, was a teacher, and she wanted those values that she believed in to show up in her students, and that's why the Barbara Jordan Forum is so important.
I will begin with a quote from Barbara Jordan. A government is invigorated when each of us is willing to participate in shaping the future of this nation. Distinguished guests, LBJ students, alums, faculty, staff, and friends, good afternoon. It will be a while before we have an opportunity like this again. My name is Ladi Mosadami, class of 2007. And I'm thrilled to introduce to you the Barbara Jordan Visiting Professor in Ethics and Political Values. She holds a BA in Sociology from Howard University and a master's degree from the University of Pennsylvania in the same subject. She has taught sociology and political science at historically Black colleges and universities. Following this experience, she worked on political campaigns in Atlanta, eventually landing the roles as Commissioner of Cultural Affairs, Chief Administrative Officer, and City Manager. In 2001, her bid to become the first African-American mayor of any major southern city was successful. During her tenure, she was instrumental in improving the city's percentage of LEED certified buildings, repairing a hazardous sewage system, and leading a delegation of members from the city's Chamber of Commerce to secure a direct route to one of the fastest growing economies in the world, China. She was named Governing Magazine's 2004 Public Official of the Year, and she was the recipient of the Profile and Courage Award in 2005, issued by the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation. In the same year, Time magazine named her as one of the 5 best big city mayors, and U.S. News & World Report named her among the best leaders of 2005. Later that year, she was re-elected as mayor with more than 90% of the vote. In 2006, she led the effort to... Yeah. She'll verify that fact independently. In 2006, she led the effort to have the papers of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. given to his alma mater, Morehouse College, instead of being sold at auction. I have mentioned but a few of her accomplishments, achievements, and accolades. Believe me, there are a lot more. But one thing is very clear. She has had her hand in invigorating government and shaping the future of this great nation. After sharing a delightful conversation the other week, it's apparent that her focus is not solely espousing the virtues and values of Barbara Jordan, but equally, if not more importantly, engaging in the challenging and complex work that still remains to be done 40 plus years following Jordan's election to office. And there's a lot of work to do. Like I said, folks, it'll be a while before we have an opportunity like this again. So ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to introduce to you the Barbara Jordan Visiting Professor in Ethics and Political Values at the LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas, Austin, Ms. Shirley Franklin.
I want to thank Lottie. He not only introduced me today with a very generous introduction, but he also took me to a great coffee shop. And I appreciate that. I told the dean as I was coming up, thank you. Thank you so much for this awesome opportunity. It is wonderful to be here in Texas. I can't see all of you, so you gotta move. You know, I've been in politics. You gotta connect, folks. I am so happy. I'm so happy to be here. And everyone has been so gracious and wonderful in their welcoming of me. Some have asked me why Texas, and I will tell you why Texas, because Texas is a great place to be. It's the intersection of culture and politics, and the economy is really an unbelievable place in today's world. So I am delighted to be here, and it's a lot warmer. I have a few people that I just need to acknowledge. You know, when you have good friends who travel a long distance, you want to be sure that other people know that. So I have Carol Naughton from Purpose Built Communities, Evan Smith from Purpose Built Communities, Ingrid Saunders Jones from the Coca-Cola Company. You all are not standing up. I just want you to see some of these folks. Evan, Cecilia Hunter, Veronica Biggins, Deborah Richardson from the National Center. Deborah, where are you? There you are. I'm not sure whether they came to encourage me or to drag me back. But I can tell you that I take their presence, encouragement that there's much of us to do and working together. So I'm excited to have each of you join us today. I also have a written speech. I know in an academic environment you're supposed to have such. And so I have a written speech, and my friends were taking notes on whether I would speak from my speech. I can tell you that getting ready for today was a real treat because it gave me an opportunity to really review and to think about Barbara Jordan and what she means, both in my own life and in the lives of Americans, but also in the lives of men and women around the world. And it is not, you know, I'm one of those people who likes to look back over history so I can understand not so much the present, but what might work into the future. And Barbara's life, the Honorable Barbara Jordan, offers us many lessons for today's world. And I heard the dean yesterday. I want to congratulate the students before I get on with anything else. I was able to go to the luncheon program yesterday and to hear the discussion about people who knew and loved Barbara, and also to participate in the discussion about her life, what she loved, things she struggled with. But I also, I've been to the library. How many of you been to the library recently? Come on, folks. This is a great new, I'm a politician. Come on. Come on down. You've got to go over to the library. It's a wonderful, wonderful example of leadership in the world, the LBJ Library. And one of my favorite parts was listening to the president in the recordings and hearing his voice and his persuasive qualities and his directness about what he had in mind, how he felt you fit into that, and his willingness to say that you could have some say eventually in how that would be shaped. But I really encourage all of you who haven't been recently to go to the library. So let's go back to Barbara Jordan. I grew up in Philadelphia. I'm a child of the 1940s and 50s. When I grew up, there was not a chance that there would be a Barbara Jordan. There was not a chance that we would see. I did not see women of color, men of color on television. There were 3 stations on television, and I did not see the likes of a Barbara Jordan on television. My earliest memories are of Amos and Andy. Some of you remember that. Nat King Cole's 15-minute show. Do you remember that? Calloway performers. Jack Benny, remember that in Rochester? The images of women or people of color were non-existent in the media. And it wasn't clear to me then that I would live to see women and men of color, and probably even less women of color, in a public role, influencing public policy, shaping public policy, and in fact, directing and redirecting public policy. So Barbara Jordan was born about a decade before I was, so I know that she must have had a similar experience. She must not have thought that it was even possible for her to be on the national stage as a young woman. But something within Barbara Jordan propelled her to be the person that we celebrate today. It was not just something within her, it was also something around her. In those days, a lot of the news came by word of mouth, came from church, came from small groups. People around her helped to cultivate her. Helped to cultivate her sense of self-confidence. The very university where we celebrate her today would not allow her to participate as a student. It wasn't because her GMAT scores were not high enough. It was not because she didn't fill out the application on time and submit it. It was a matter of public policy. She didn't look the way she was supposed to look. She was not the person that the University of Texas at the time expected to be a leader. So you have to ask yourself, how do people overcome that kind of disadvantage? And I'm sure there are some courses that tell us that. I'm not the scholar who's joining the faculty. I'm sure there are some courses, but my experience tells me that it's not one factor. Clearly a keen intellect, but largely educated at a time that did not expect her to have that intellect. Clearly a supportive community. I don't know much about her family, but I know there had to be members of her family who encouraged her every step of the way. A deep sense of believing that as a child of God, as she was born, as you know, to a family of a Baptist minister, as a child of God, God did not make any mistakes. That God had given her all of this energy and intellect, and she was willing to step out on faith, to take the risk of failure, which is another important quality of leadership. It's easy to talk about winning. It's hard to talk about failing. And every failure has a series of lessons. And one of the lessons that I think that we learned from Barbara Jordan is that she was not successful the first time she ran for public office. I didn't know that. She ran a couple of times. And today I met the gentleman she beat for the Congress. I did. Curtis Graves. Curtis was the first African American in the House, the Texas House. He was a young man, and he probably was expected to be the favored candidate and the person to win. Now, I've been in politics long enough to know, I started as a volunteer. I've been in politics long enough to know that sometimes you win because you are the best, and sometimes you just get a lucky break. And both count when you're counting the votes. Sometimes you win because you are by far the best candidate, have the best platform. Sometimes you win because you have the best campaign. You may not be the best candidate, but your campaign is so good. I'm not sure what the case was with Barbara Jordan in the beginning, but what she proved is that she was more than equal to the job. No one that I have met, I've met students, I've met her teachers, I've met her faculty colleagues. No one that I've met who knew Barbara Jordan did not think that she was equal to the job. She was equal to the job both in her own mind, but equally important in the perspective of the public. People were willing to accept her in leadership at a time when leadership from an African American woman was not likely outside of traditional roles. When she went to the U.S. House of Representatives, she went with my mentor, Andrew Young, who was the first male elected, African American male elected since Reconstruction. And Andy tells the story of being close seatmates with Barbara Jordan. And I can imagine they were quite a pair. Barbara Jordan, as you're laughing because some of you know Andy, too. Andy's very informal. He would be pleased today that I'm not speaking from a prepared text. He thinks you should always speak from your heart. I don't know how that's going to work in a classroom. But Barbara Jordan, very specific, very clearly choosing her words, choosing her battles, choosing her issue, making sure that there is no question that you understand what she's saying. She makes it clear that she's a patriot and is not questioning the democracy. But she also makes it clear that she expects the democracy to modify and change over time. When Michelle Obama, the First Lady, said she was finally feeling as if she was accepted as an American after Barack Obama's election, there was a huge discussion. Is what's wrong with her? What's wrong with her? Barbara Jordan said exactly the same thing. Alexander Hamilton, well, maybe they just forgot her. Maybe it was a mistake. Well, we have a university president in Atlanta who was attempting to describe the value of the democracy a few days ago in a panel discussion. And he used as the example of why the democracy is so good and how it is flexible enough to be this great democracy we celebrate. He used the example of 3/5 of the men in the Constitution. Oh, yes, he did. And as my political friend said, his explanation of that was twice as long after the furor that came from the result of that. His heart was in the right place, but he used an example of an open wound. America still has an open wound around race, and it's added to that an open wound around immigration. I do have in my speech that we are a nation of immigrants struggling with how to be a nation of immigrants. It's a strange thing. We continue to struggle with who we are. Who are we as a people? What matters to us today? And Barbara Jordan's legacy is not as much what she did, although I think is phenomenal. And for some of the reasons I've described. It's phenomenal because it was not expected. It was not expected. Andy Young tells me the stories that even during the Civil Rights Movement, they never expected the success that they had. It was beyond imagination that the Voting Rights Act would be passed. It was beyond imagination that Thurgood Marshall would be on the Supreme Court. Beyond imagination. But those are the lessons that we can use today. When Barbara Jordan says, I was left out, don't think about her being left out. Let's think about who's left out today. Now, you may not agree with me, and I don't have a solution. When President Bush was in office and I was mayor of Atlanta, the Secretary of Commerce came to Atlanta for an event. And I went to him and said, I'd like to support the immigration policy that's being recommended in the U.S. Senate. And he said, well, you don't want to make any changes? I said, no. He said, well, do you know much about it? I said, no. He said, well, how can you support it? I said, this country needs new immigration so badly that we need to start with a baseline, and I believe that it will change over time incrementally. Now, there's one area where Barbara Jordan didn't think that was true. If you look at her speeches in her life, she did not go full force into some areas. But on the issue of ethics, she was really, really clear that there was a bright line. And that bright line was so bright that you could not cross that line. So here we are, 20 years, decades after her passing, and she still is a leader on ethics today. Now, if you pick up any newspaper, or perhaps some people don't read the newspaper picking it up anymore, they turn it on. If you look at any newspaper, there are questions nearly every single day about the ethical behavior in every single sector of American society. It can be true in universities. It can be true in the business sector. And it is certainly true in the public sector. If we follow Barbara Jordan's standards, the standards she set for herself, and that we believe we should set for ourselves, then there is no question you have to do what you say and say what you mean and perform to the highest possible standard with ethical standards, legal standards, not sometimes, not when people are watching, but every single solitary time. Her voice is clear on ethics today as if she were among us. But let me bring it to home to Texas. You know, if you're from Georgia or Detroit or Phoenix or maybe even Miami these days, the economy is suffering. You come to Texas and I'm in the cab and I ask the cab driver, well, how's business? You know, I'm a mayor, so the business of the city is really important to me. That means people are paying taxes and they're paying fees and they're spending money. He says, oh, we're fine. I said, well, how did you do in the recession? He said, well, you know, I lived in Atlanta for a couple of years, but I had to move to Texas. That's a true story. My first cab ride. First cab ride. He said, well, you know, we have a strong economy here. We have a very strong economy. Well, there is a sense when you are doing very well that you can just go about your business and not worry about things. You're not worried about other people's problems. And you know, one of the challenges that I see in Texas, that I see right here at the LBJ school, that you're doing so well that you might have blinders on. Don't stop breathing on me. In politics, you can tell when people are about to gasp, you know? Don't stop breathing on me. You know, I've met a few people who said, students especially, when I'm standing in the taco line or I'm going up on the elevator and I ask them, oh, they'll say, you know, welcome. And I'll say, well, what would you like me to do? The first and most frequent response I get, is we need more diversity. Now, I'm telling you, these are white students, black students, they're all kinds of students. We need more diversity of all kinds. University of Texas is big enough, good enough, the reputation is strong enough, the endowment is big enough to make that so. To make that so. Not in 20 years, not in 30 years, but soon. So it's great to celebrate Barbara Jordan. You all stop breathing. Don't get nervous. That's the most radical thing I'm going to say. But you know, the dean told me, the provost told me, the faculty have told me that that's an issue that matters to them. So if I was speaking on the King holiday in Atlanta, which I had a chance to do from time to time, I would say that if you want to celebrate Dr. King, you can't just have a luncheon. You can't just have a rally. You just can't write a report. You can't tell your children about it. You have to do something about it. You have to make the commitment, which is what Barbara Jordan did. I heard it from the dean yesterday. I heard it from some students. That is what she did. She didn't just say, I want America to be great and write a book about it. She said, I want America to be great and I'm going to put myself in the middle of the dialogue. My question is, who's the next Barbara Jordan? It's certainly not I. Who are the next Barbara Jordans? And why is that not a topic for discussion? Why is that not a topic for discussion right here at the University of Texas? I've already said you're big enough. I know the sports are great. First thing my children said, University of Texas is great. They're big college athletic and sports fans. I'm telling you that that is the real challenge. Now, the challenge is not the solution, because solutions don't come if you're not really able to delve deeply into what the issues are. I've been here 6 weeks. I have no idea. I have no idea why the University of Texas and the LBJ School has any problem attracting diverse faculty, diverse staff, diverse students. And diverse donors. I have no idea. But you know, my job is to find out. My job is to help you figure that out. No, I know my contract says I'll teach a course. I got it. I've been a mayor. There's some things you just have to do because that's what's required by the bureaucracy and the terms and the conditions. I'm not suggesting that this is instead of my contractual obligations. I'm not talking about a public speaking series. I'm talking about something more fundamental than that. I don't know Texas. The only thing I know about Texas and UT is what you've told me. So if I'm saying something that's a little bit on the edge, you should have called my Atlanta friends first. They would tell you. My job in the Olympics, when I worked for Billy Payne and we were hosting the Olympics, my job for Andrew Young, my job for Maynard Jackson, in addition to the day-to-day running of government, I was the front person on all the tough stuff. So when 500 firefighters marched on City Hall, who do you think went? When people were upset and complaining and yelling and screaming about something, they sent me because I was short and I was a woman and they were hoping that I would get some sympathy. But it had developed in me a real sense of what it means to be on the front line. And this school and the university has the opportunity to be on the front line. That people 20 years from now will look back and say, not only did Barbara Jordan teach at the LBJ school, her spirit, her soul, her commitment is in the fiber of everything that happens. If we care about her, it's not right to march and sing and praise her and then forget about her 2 days later. I don't know what the challenges are. You do. I'm inviting you to be engaged with the school in a way that transforms it the way Barbara Jordan changed political life for America. I'm inviting you to do that. You had Stacey Abrams last year at this very luncheon. Stacey is a bright and wonderful young leader. Stacey, when she left city government to run for the Georgia House, my advice to her was not to do it, that she wasn't quite ready. She was right and I was wrong. It is from Stacey that I am gaining kind of the courage to tell you that we can do this together. Now, a lot of people here took classes from Barbara Jordan, people who read it and use it. What are you doing about it? What are you doing about it? Would she not have Latinos more fully represented in this school? Would she not have more African Americans? Would she not have more openly gay students? Or students with disabilities? Is that what she was talking about when she talked about the America that includes her? She just wasn't talking about women of color, African American women, women from the inner city. She was talking about all those other groups, all the immigrants who come to America looking for a new life, but equally looking to contribute to our country. I welcome you to my first chance to talk to you about what Barbara Jordan means to me. Thank you.
Just a few closing remarks. I'm pretty sure I speak for everyone here in saying, wow. And Shirley, I did talk to some of your friends in Atlanta. I knew exactly what we were getting, although I'm finding we're getting even more than I'd hoped for. We are so glad to have you here. Thank you for being with us. Thank you not only for reminding us of the legacy of Barbara Jordan, but giving us the promise of redeeming that legacy in what we do every day. Thank all of you for coming, and have a great day. Thank you.